What is up, down and sideways, all you beautiful individuals? It is another episode of League Unlock. Here I with you guys for our actual first stand action from Brazil, right into best of fives and right into being blessed with some silver scrapes action with BLG and BNK kicking things off in this. This was a very back and forth series, bit of a roller coaster. Looked like it could be a sweep initially, and then you're kind of going, okay, now this is BNK's to take, and then of course it ends up not being the case. But obviously this was a level up and a showing that BNK deserved to be here.
And I think one of the most important discussions will be about the draft for Game 5, but we will get there at this point. Yes, of course, that is the intensity that comes through when it is a Silver Scrapes matchup, and especially on the international stage to kickstart everything at first stand. Couldn't have really asked for more, as you said, with BLG jumping out to that advantage, but BNK showing that they do deserve to be in this type of consideration, and especially where people were feeling they were on equal type of terms with a squad like BLG, despite being the #1 team from the LPL. Didn't work out in Game 5, and we'll talk about that one now, because that draft, and that is the biggest problem for me, because again, the way this series played out, BLG had the early advantage, early hand, and BNK gets back in and has the momentum on their side. And it's one of those things where I understand it's not truly a quantifiable type of thing. You can't actually put a statistic or measurement or whatever there, but it is a real human emotion and type of thing that does carry over in a series. And you get to Game 5, and how do you keep that momentum rolling? You've just hyper-pumped him with your hyper-carry super dude in the bottom lane, Diable, and you slot him in on Jhin for Game 5?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to look at for this draft in Game 5, as it's fearless, and especially because Diable was just kind of bodying Viper this entire series, and I'm going to have to do like a montage of Jhin picks in decisive elimination games that end up falling on their faces. This is one of them. But respect to the rest of this pick comp for BLG. You know, the Camille support down there, and then an old iconic counter pick in the Morgana. This time it's not against the LeBlanc, it's against the Zoe for Vikla. And so BLG was cooking in this fifth game, and you know, you got to give them credit for that, and credit for them falling down 2-1 in this series and then coming back with two pretty dominant wins in Game 4 and 5 to win the set.
It's just so hard for me to overlook that Jhin pick, though. And you're right that there does have to go some credit over for the construction of the draft on the side of BLG, which was certainly one of the angles that makes the Jhin pick actually even worse in that thing, because you're trying to say, number one, it's a bad pick because it's not the right engine, not the right optimal tool to hand over to someone like Diable and what he has been giving you this series. And then on top of it, well, how do you even expect him to get to whatever you're expecting him to be in that final game, or rely upon him when you've got the options that you pick a Lee Sin without having the Poppy banned away whatsoever? Again, as you laid out, you're throwing in the Camille. You've got the Morgana. I don't care how good Diable is able to play that Jhin in that situation, and whatever you think about Jhin, Jin's not going to be able to beat Jhin in that game, because he's going to get dove by 3-4 champions and have nothing against it in that situation. So there was outside of even that individual pick, outside of the individual performance on Diable, it's not set up to have that type of success or type of impact in the game. And part of that is due to that construction and execution on the side of BLG. And I think one of the things that BNK is going to have to learn as they have been leveling up and becoming more competitive for these top tier teams is how to handle the pressure, how to handle these Game 5 type of situations. And Game 5s against not the DN Supers, not against, Nongshim, but Game 5s against BLGs, against a Gen G on the other side. It's a different story.
And you know what? Credit also the mental warfare. I think Vikla is going to come a lot stronger after this series, because my man was getting killed before 5 minutes pretty much in every game this series, sometimes multiple times before anybody even had their ultimate in this game. And somehow we were still going to 5 games, even though especially the Galio and the Annie game were particularly yikes of a hit.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where it's the unfortunate side of you can look at this, match heading into it, and if I told you, well, Diable outplayed Viper in probably 4 out of the 5 games in this series, or whatever, you take that, but then you would be countered by, well, Knight and the rest of BLG absolutely put a target and took down Vikla in the mid lane and made that less of a priority. That would be one of those things that should be an adjustment and could be, again, one of those motivating factors for a squad like BFX. BNK, how do you pick yourself up? You just simply look at this type of performance, couple changes in a couple areas, and you can find yourself going, again, toe-to-toe with the top of the LPL. Still a very good showing, even if you are on the losing side of it.
Yeah, and especially, again, when you go back earlier into this series, a 0-4-9 Annie is winning a game, which doesn't happen very often. But this quickly looked like it was going to be a 2-0 for BLG. And then you have really the only shining star is the Jinx Karma bot lane for BNK in that second game. And even then, you have Diable pushing, trying to kill a turret, kind of suiciding, recalling in a spot that he shouldn't, getting caught out. And then you fully see the double-edged sword as he gets us the first pentakill of the tournament to just all of a sudden... BNK winning that game in 26 minutes doesn't really do justice how that game actually played out.
No, but it also then again it brings right back to the pain point of that game 5 and the collapse of that draft and the misprioritization of it going. You're still in this series. You've been up and down within it, but you're in it, and you've got Diable performing like this, giving you a pentakill, getting you over that hump, and it again. To have that draft with him on that pick and having what is available on the other side to counter it is simply a massive failure in this moment. And it's one of those ones where if you're looking for BNK to do well, you got to hope they pick themselves off the mat here at the first stand.
And I think what you can take from this, BNK still absolutely has skill set potential to get out of this group as top 2, and BLG came awake for this tournament, which they haven't done in international ones past, because the 3 games that they did win were absolute domination. We're talking 29-3 in turrets across those 3 wins.
You feel good about BLG. You feel good about a lot of the signs that you saw in this series. You're still, I think, waiting for the true eruption of Viper down in the bottom lane as far as his contribution.
It's a bad series. Again, aside from that Caitlyn game, it was a bad series from him.
Right, and so that's where, I kind of pump the brakes a little bit on BLG being the BLG that we all kind of maybe wanted or people would fear them to be at an international event. I'm not quite there yet, and mainly that is just waiting for that angle of the team to be that scary at this point. But still, everything else, and especially, again, the combination and synergy around the mid and jungle, which is always, again, jungle, a big thing we talk about with BLG, was very good so far in this series.
And, one more time, Knight absolutely gapping Vikla in the 6-1. After I was ready to add Knight onto his list, my man solo killing Faker, solo killing Chovy, and just dominating some of these matchups was not the case today against BLG and Knight. Second series of the day, and full disclosure, as we're recording this, we're going in to Game 3 for G2 against Team Secret Wales, and fresh off of a Game 2 that was maybe the spiciest game of the day so far. Things could change, but spicier than any of the BLG BNK ones, because this was an absolute bloodbath, back and forth, pretty insane team comps actually on both sides, as G2 locks in the Ashe, and everybody knows it's going to be Seraphine. They pivot to put in the Braum, which is actually a great counter against the Nautilus, the Misfortune, and the Akali. Actually loved that pivot and draft from G2.
I gotta say, man, they're channeling the local vibes. This felt very much CB LOL type of intensified on the Rift with the way that those fights were going nonstop, back and forth. Both teams finding little edges, little advantages here or there. Still, G2 coming out on top, I think, due to some fortunate circumstances, I think we'll put it. But still, overall, what a great series this has been so far. And I think, again, early signs that, yes, if G2 is playing at their very best, they should be in that consideration, should be up towards that territory we just saw with BNK and BLG. But at the same time, if they're off just that little bit, they can be taken by a squad like Team Secret Wales, because they are not that far behind is certainly in far what they do, and especially when you can get a little bit chaotic on the Rift and things get thrown around, they can find ways to strike and find their own advantages.
And case in point, the gold graph for this game, it was very up and down. It felt like the team that was at a disadvantage in a team fight somehow wrestled their way to a skirmish win multiple times throughout. Gotta shout out Hans Sama in this game, because playing Ashe against a Nefiri, Olaf, and Akali sounds pretty much impossible. And having, less than like 6 deaths, let alone 2 deaths in this game, he piloted and kited basically as good as you possibly could in this set.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crazy thing to take away from this one game, is looking at all the action, all the things that happen, and especially the setup. And Hansama gets through pretty much unscathed, was the crazy thing coming through there. I also think Broken Blade on the Aatrox, I thought he was something that was special in there, really did some good job, especially again, as things kind of got a little bit sloppy and all over the place in this game. I think he was still finding angles for G2, which I really liked.
And I think now Broken Blade can chalk up the Kled versus Olaf matchup. Even when he has Ignite, don't take it level 1 maybe, and at least not with the grasp rune that he had to do, because that was the reason G2 was so behind for like 15 minutes of the game, and why he was down 50 CS basically the entire game was that level 1.
I think limit testing in that regard, and as
we
well,
found the limit.
Not only his limit, but testing Team Secret Whales and what he could try and pull off there, and getting a quick, a very firm reminder, I think, from them on that it was not going to fly.
Much, very close back and forth game 2. Game 1 was a bit more of a stomp, and I know whenever G2 isn't dominating and Caps is on something like a Galio, people freak out, especially because he had such a masterclass of an Ahri performance in that first game.
Right, and that's one of those ones where you're met with kind of, again, and it's one of the things that you roll with, and it's kind of crazy to say, but I think the only other player that I could put in that type of category is Faker. When you think about his type of impact for the team and what he can do, a lot of times, yes, you get relegated to being that support type of member, not necessarily the number one sword within the, weapons case type of thing. But you know that if he is given the tools, the handle on that sword, he can make a mighty fine cut there. And that is exactly, as you said, game 1 on the Ahri, some fancy moves, some good kill pressure. You love to see those things on the international stage from Caps. And again, goes to what I was talking about with G2. They show us that, which is, I think, near their top level of form right now. You think that they can roll through this series and absolutely set up, line up the BNK, line up a BLG one, give me that meaty, juicy matchup. But again, if they're not at that one, this series is a very different story. But right now, it has been enough for G2.
And again, it felt like that was the big, side-to-side momentum pusher, winning that second game. As again, we're only a few minutes into game 3, and spoilers, Broken Blade has been solo killed again in a Shen Jax matchup at level 3. But still, feel like the momentum is for G2, and I'd be very surprised if they end up getting reverse swept from this point.
That just smells like BB's going to be a problem later in the game type of thing. I've seen that story too many times. Oh, he's out of the game. One solo bolo. I think
that's
I got
when he really
BB
locks in.
Yeah, exactly, for the rest of the squad. But so far, it has been very G2 controlled outside of what was a little bit of that back and forth within game 2 all the way through. But still early, good signs, good showings from G2 so far. This is exactly what you wanted to see, I think, if you are an LEC faithful, to see that this is the version of G2 that you've got to start out this international event.
And it might be game 4 that G2 clinches this, because BB just TP'd back and died again immediately. So
okay.
I've
also seen that.
Maybe.
I've also seen this movie before, and yeah, it usually does lead to another game in the series.
So we'll call it Team Secret Whales might take this third game, but G2 probably going to bounce back in game 4, and we'll eat our words on the next episode if they end up getting reverse swept. This is just day 1 action in First Stand. Obviously, we got all day 2. I've heard from Tabe talking about 3 hours of VOD review that the squad does in wins, 4 to 5 hours in losses, and they're preparing, supercharging up for their matchup against Gen G, which makes me think it'll be a competitive 3-0 for Gen G.
Yeah, it's hard. I think I can certainly see an angle where that is how things play out. It's harder when you say, well, maybe it'll get to 4 games. I'm starting to pull back at that type of moment. But if you say competitive 3-0, I can find a way that JDG looks to find and have that type of fight, but ultimately never be enough to find a way to capture one of those games from Gen G. It's one where I'd love to be wrong. And again, we have seen this type of stuff from Hong Q and Junjia specifically in the jungle, being able to topple the expected winners from the LCK and everything else. I think this version of Gen G right now and how dominant they have been is going to be a little bit of a different beast to handle.
Give me a gold lead, maybe even in the driver's seat for some point in all three of these games for JDG, but we know what happens when Gen G sets up for 5v5s and how absolutely absurd this squad is. And the day 2 action, if you're looking to find some silver scrapes, it seems much more likely that it'll come in that Loud versus Lion gaming matchup. And despite having such a small venue, small crowd, you've already heard the Thunder Sticks. The fans have been really loud. It's going to be a few decibel notches higher as soon as Loud hits the stage.
You better believe that it's going to go even louder when Loud is there. And if they're able to pull off a win in any of these ones, not just the series, but in any of these games, you get any of these and it starts snowballing. You get that crowd, the reason to cheer. You're going to be in a pretty hostile environment if you are Leon Gaming going out there. So yes, definitely one of those ones that you want to control the kind of momentum and the narrative of that series early has got to be one of the priorities if you are Leon Gaming. Otherwise, you're in for one heck of an afternoon in that regard when it does get going, does get loud in this situation at the venue. Gonna be one heck of a time, and I'm telling you, if we're talking about silver scrapes, I'm not feeling so good about that one.
Yeah. So now, what's more likely, Lion losing this series or Gen G losing a game to JDG?
I think a Lion losing their series is got to be the
answer.
Bad, as much as I'd love to say, but I think that's almost less about Lion and more about Gen G on just how good they are and how in front, in this type of situation. Yes, there's still maybe some issues, concerns, doubts with JDG in that regard on who their opponent is, different than the way it was in the BLG and B&K matchup. But yeah, I think for me right now, Gen G, until we see otherwise, is just so impressive, so dominant, so strong that you have to give them that type of respect.
We've seen so many times, day 1, match 1 of these internationals is kind of a big potential for upsets because, guys are still dealing with time zone changes, travel days. They haven't been there long. They're totally in a different schedule and have things to settle. So maybe that's your hopium angle for a squad like JDG, because once Gen G is warmed up with some games under their belt, they feel like an absolutely unstoppable machine on the Rift. I'll tell you what's not unstoppable. It's very stoppable, and that is the Witchcraft Project. Los Ratones 2.0, a couple of series under their belt, and the season is over. It's the end of an era, part 2, Yamato and the boys. Bwipo comes in. It turns out Bwipo is not Baus. This team made more noise with their kind of toxic scrim comms than actually on the Rift, and it turns out the chill, calming vibes of Baus and the leadership of Kadril might have been the secret sauce to this team.
Yeah, I think there was obviously some kind of optimism involved in this project and grouping it together, and what was hopefully going to be a continuation of that spirit of Los Ratones and what they had done to the scene, especially for the fans. No, that was not what the product was at the end of the day. And I think, again, yes, a lot of that difference in it is partly due to, again, part of that vision and drive from someone like Kadril behind the scenes and how involved he was and everything else. And as well, the mixture of the players and how that all worked out. I think it was really one of these ones that, again, shows just how special, just how unique, just how hard of a situation it is to come up with something as special as we had with Los Ratones. And that's not easily as simply snap your fingers, try to get a replacement out there, capitalize on it. You saw how this one is. It fizzled out.
And I think, to be fair to the squad, it's a quick turnaround to have that heartbreak ending to LEC versus. I know it's still been over a month, but to guys were just finishing playoffs in the LEC, and now you're already going to a whole new tournament. You're under a new team, organization. It's kind of a whirlwind, and I feel like guys were already probably a little bit heartbroken. This loss might sting a little less because it's not as high up as what the LEC versus was, and most of them have already won the EMEA Masters. But pretty much quickly afterwards, Reckless was doing a scream and already broke down his schedule for the rest of the year. He's going to be co-streaming these internationals and already looking ahead to next year where he wants to play or coach. He said he's looking to be support, 80 carry. He's going to be splitting boot camp time in Korea, playing those two roles, and absolutely open to coaching opportunities as well, which is great to hear because it's going to be a sad day when Reckless officially retires.
Oh, it'll be a terrible day for Rain when Reckless does finally step away from the scene in that full capacity. But I think this is one of the most exciting things that we've talked about in the last little bit is him talking about what is going to be next up for him. And again, having the options and one of those things where you never want to take it away from someone in that regard of being a player in either ADC or support, as you mentioned. I think that would be wonderful. But I'm much more excited at the proposition of the coach about being involved on a coaching staff and getting to share his experiences and insight on the game and everything else. I think that would be invaluable when you're looking at what it could do, especially for any LEC or LCS level squad at this point. I think would be very much so something that would be an attractive and exciting opportunity to add to. So I think that, again, knowing that he still is going to be involved, whatever the capacity is going to be, is that good news.
And listen, you've seen co-streams out of him in the past at Worlds and other big events, and he obviously has insane game knowledge, is a very cerebral player, and has become, I think, a much more vocal, communicative player since that role swap to support. So yeah, if I'm a lot of LEC teams, I'm not waiting until next year. I might take a flyer on him as a positional bot lane coach for spring or summer split, because this guy, like, we're a decade and a half almost of experience that this guy has. So hopefully see him even before next season somewhere, depending on how things play out. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you beautiful people. Thanks for hanging out as always, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.